and welcome to Dialogue. For decades, the Asia-Pacific region has enjoyed relative peace and stability and has become a global engine for growth. But the rising geopolitical tensions and strategic rivalries are now putting that stability to the test. How can countries in the region work together to promote peace and shared growth? What is the state of China's relations with Singapore and Australia? And as China continues to rise, how do Singapore and Australia navigate their relationship between Beijing and Washington? To unpack these questions, I'm joined in the first part of the show by George Yeo, former Singaporean Minister of Foreign Affairs. In the second half, we'll talk to Gareth Evans, former Foreign Minister of Australia. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue, George. So we started with Singapore, China, the relationship. The Prime Minister was in China not long ago. And how do you look at the relationship between the two countries now?
Oh, it's going from strength to strength. There is deeper understanding of each other and new ways of working together in a world which is changing by the minute. It's a good relationship. And one which is mutually beneficial.
You know, we have this U.S. tariffs on basically their major partners, basically everybody else, including Singapore and Australia, for example, countries who actually has a deficit with the U.S., also 10% tariff. How do you look at the tariff thing, you know? Will it ultimately serve the U.S. interests, or what's its impact on global economy?
Well, Trump is going back to an old world where there's no WTO, where there's no MFN, where trade is part of politics, part of relationship. I like you, I need you more, so we have one regime. I don't like you, you need me more, we have another regime. So Trump has abandoned all the ideals of free trade. He thinks that this will benefit the US more. If you think about it, it is because the US no longer feels the same self-confidence which it had in the past, when it was 40% of the global economy. It set the rules, and it said, well, you can depoliticize trade. And that was what the WTO was. But the US is no longer in such a position, and it feels a growing insecurity about itself. And it has turned the table around and said, you are exploiting me, and therefore I will have to take actions to protect myself. So Trump, I think he enjoys doing it. He doesn't understand that it causes a lot of confusion. Imagine if you're a ship with 20,000 containers going to the US, and in the middle of the voyage, Trump has changed his mind. Now, what do you do? And if you are receiving those containers, do you want them? Maybe you don't want them. Or maybe you want the ship to speed up so that it arrives before the new policies are in place. The supply chain is now in a dither because of Trump. And Trump doesn't understand that you can change your mind from day to day. But it's a long tail. But this is a phase we are living through. It's there, it's got power. We adjust to it. And as you said earlier, trade is like water, you know, it will always find its way. You can have all the rules you want, but whatever the rules, people will find a way around the rules.
Right. Yes, trade will go on, maybe in different shapes and forms, but what about countries caught in between the U.S. and China? You know, we all understand the number one target for the U.S. in terms of tariff, the trade is China. What do people call they call it a poisoned article in agreement, in trade agreement, like the agreement between Vietnam and the U.S. You know, part of the agreement is targeting China, like transshipping goods from Vietnam to the U.S. Countries like Vietnam, countries like Singapore, and countries in the region, you know, have a strong relationship with both sides. How should they handle this desirable situation?
We say, okay, transshipment 40%. What is transshipment? What are the rules of origin? How do you calculate rules of origin? How do you police transfer pricing? These are all difficult issues. And you need an entire bureaucracy to write out the rules and to enforce them. And if you don't have this bureaucracy to do it, traders will play games. So we should not be too fixated about the numbers. The fact is, tariffs are an additional tax on American people. And maybe that's what Trump wants. He wants to increase revenues. Will it revive American manufacturing? It is not so easy. I mean, you go to EU and you buy whatever, a kitchen utensil. By the time it arrives in a supermarket or on Amazon in the US, it costs 10 times more. 10 times more, roughly, rule of thumb. So you increase the price of purchase from EU by 50%. Okay, it goes to America, 50% can be absorbed. Can this revive manufacturing in the US? I'm not so sure. And do you want to revive all kinds of manufacturing in the US? The US is an advanced society. There are things it is very good at. There are things it is not good at. I think the US should concentrate on technology and revive that, manufacturing technology. But even if they do all the right things now, it'll take another 20 years to recover fully.
It will take time.
It takes time. And in the meantime, people must live and goods must flow. Mm-hmm. So this is a very interesting period in world history. We will live with it.
You said in the recent interview that you suggested that the new generations of Western scholars should restudy modern China as well as history.
Absolutely. There's such poor understanding of China in the West today. They concentrate on politics, on Xi Jinping, on the Communist Party. But Xi Jinping and the Communist Party did not begin on a blank sheet of paper. They begin with 5,000 years of history, and they cannot escape it. I remember what Mao Zedong said before he died. He said, I've only managed to change a few things around Beijing. Because the material is Chinese civilization, which you inherit, which you cannot change. So Westerners who deal with China, they must try to understand China more deeply. And today, the degree of understanding of China in the West is very shallow. And to me, because it's shallow, it is very dangerous. Because they will make mistakes. And these mistakes will be lose-lose for China also. So it is in China's interest, really, to make itself more easily understood.
The US is seemingly, distancing themselves away from Ukraine situation after trying to get a ceasefire or peace deal.
Trump is the first US administration to openly recognize that the US now exists in a multipolar world. The Biden administration still wanted to be number one, top dog, supremo. But Trump administration is more realistic because they have a big budget deficit. They know their own strengths are limited. So on Ukraine, they were leading the eastward expansion of NATO. Then they led the Western opposition to Russia. Now Trump said, hey, why am I spending all this money? You should be spending the money. This is an insurance policy. If you don't spend the money, there's no insurance. And the European powers are shocked. Suddenly Trump is talking directly to the Russians above the heads of the Ukrainians and European people. And sometimes he wants to be the mediator. Europe is reeling from this. They don't quite know how to respond. So Trump went there and said, no, you must spend more, NATO conference.
Okay, 5% now?
But let's say they spend 5%. After 10, 20 years, they will develop military muscles. Then they will no longer have to follow the US. they will begin to develop their own policy. And Europe will have to live with Russia because Russia is going to be there forever. So Trump, in a sense, is helping to crystallize a multipolar world because of US relative weakness.
In Shangri-La dialogue and also recently, I think the U.S. Pentagon officials talked about, that's the defense secretary talked about his expectation Asian allies, I guess Japan, South Korea, like Australia, to increase their defense spending relatively the same as the Europeans do, 5%, and reduce their economic relationship with China to avoid, in his words, dependence on China. Will that be realistic, be achieved?
No, realistic or not, you must expect him to talk like that. Because if you're a defense secretary, what is your business? It's defense. It's allies.
More military spending?
Yeah, so of course he should talk like that. I'm not at all surprised. You don't expect him to talk like a foreign minister.
Talk about peace.
Yeah. So no, I would not be too excited about the speech he made in Singapore.
And the Japanese, of course, South Korean and Australian leaders, they were absent. That was noticed from the recent NATO summit.
They're all more than a little angry about the way Trump treats them. They're supposed to be allies, but Trump treats them as an economic partner whom he can bully. The Japanese are normally very polite people, but this time around they're angry, Of course, it's an opportunity for China, but China can't depend on this, because they may be angry at America today, but tomorrow they'll be friendly with America. The fact is, an America which in relative terms is weakening, and you are an Australian leader, a Japanese leader, a Korean leader, and you say, look, what will the world look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? They have to be less dependent on America. And China will become more important to them. So when they plot their path into the future, they will have to triangulate differently. So this is a long-term calculus. And China should help them make this long-term calculus, not to dominate them, but to help them become more autonomous. Not that they will become adversaries of the US. They will not be. But at least their paths will be more intermediate than what they are today. And that's good for the region.
Well, of course, we talked about the changes this year. Also marks this 80th anniversary of, for example, the Chinese war against the Japanese aggression, and also the World War against fascism in European theater, in the Asian theater. It's a time to reflect, time to think about, history. History is never too far away, right? And what kind of world we are living in, and what will we have tomorrow. Is increasingly, people feel uncertain. The international system established at the end of the Second World War, surrounding the UN, the systems of the UN, but now it's being challenged. We are seeing more and more unilateral actions or protectionist policies, practices there. So what kind of world are you seeing, like now or in the near future?
For China, for Singapore, the war in Ukraine, the wars in the Middle East are distant wars. We are affected, but not that much. And we have limited influence on what happens in Europe and the Middle East. We have more influence in our own region. And today in East Asia, Southeast Asia, there's peace. And our primary objective should be to maintain peace in our region. And that will be our greatest contribution to the world. Because this region, if we include South Asia, is more than half the world, maybe 60% of the world. So if we can keep the peace in Asia, we would have made a huge contribution to humanity.
Thank you, George. Thank you for speaking to us.
My pleasure.